In this video, we're going to revise what you learned about at GCSE and animal and plant cells, and then we're going to look at what more you need to know to learn about the A-level eukaryotic cells. By the end of this session, you should be able to describe the structure of eukaryotic cells, restricted to the structure and function of the following list of organelles. Do not worry, I will go through each of these individually, and there are further videos on Moodle which talk about each organelle. You will also be able to explain that in complex multicellular organisms, eukaryotic cells become specialised to specific functions, and these cells are then organised into tissues. The tissues are organised into organs, which make up organ systems. You will also be able to apply your knowledge of these features in explaining how in particular eukaryotic cells are adapted to their function. So what is a eukaryotic cell? A eukaryotic cell is defined by a cell that holds its DNA in a distinct nucleus and has membrane-bound organelles. You've talked about eukaryotic cells since year 7, when you first started labelling animal and plant cells, but there are many more eukaryotic cells. So you know about animal cells, for example, a picture of these human skin cells, which shows their nucleus and the cell membrane. You also know about plant cells, for example, these onion cells, which shows their nucleus, the cell membrane, and if you look carefully, you can see the cell wall, which in plant cells is made out of cellulose. In the next photograph, you've got fungi cells. These are mushroom cells. You can see again that they have a membrane-bound nucleus, which holds its DNA, and they have a cell wall, but this time it's made out of chitin. And lastly, you have the protists, such as euglena. These are single-celled eukaryotic organisms. So if it's a single cell and it's eukaryotic, chances are it is a protist. At GCSE, you will have labelled an animal plant cell a lot, and you will have talked about the functions of each organelle. So what I would like you to do now is pause the video and have a go at labelling these cells and adding the function to each organelle. Let's see what you got. So number 1, pointed to that big blob in the animal and plant cell, is a nucleus. Number 2, which is pointing to that blue jelly-like substance, again in both the animal and the plant cell, is pointing to the cytoplasm. Number 3 is pointing to the black line that surrounds the animal cell and the plant cell, but it's slightly more inside for the plant cell, and that is your cell membrane. And then our last organelle, which we're going to talk about, which is common in both animal and plant cells, that oblong, purpley coloured organelle is a mitochondria. So those 4 organelles you would have talked about at GCSE as belonging to both animal and plant cells. Organelles that you only found in plant cells are your cell wall, which is made out of cellulose, your chloroplasts, and your permanent vacuole, which you can see in a plant cell is very large. So what is the function of each of these organelles? So these are your GCSE definitions. So these are the GCSE definitions of your function of each organelle. Your nucleus contains genetic material, including DNA, which controls the cell activities. The cytoplasm is a jelly-like material. It contains dissolved nutrients, salts, and structures called organelles. So it's where all your organelles are held, and this is where many of your chemical reactions happen. Your cell membrane is a structure permeable to some substances, but not to others. Therefore, it controls the movement of substances in and out of the cell. Your mitochondria are organelles that contain the enzymes for respiration, and this is where most energy is released in aerobic respiration. So it's aerobic respiration that takes place in the mitochondria. Your chloroplasts are organelles that contain the green pigment chlorophyll. Chlorophyll absorbs light energy for photosynthesis. Your chloroplasts also contain the enzymes needed for photosynthesis. The cell wall in a plant is made from cellulose fibres and strengthens the cell and supports the plant. And your permanent vacuole is filled with cell sap to help keep the cell turgid. Again, chloroplasts, the cell wall, and the permanent vacuole are only found in plant cells. So these are your GCSE definitions, and this is your organelles that you would have learned about at GCSE. But at A-level, we have some more to learn about, so let's have a look at them now. So at A-level, you look at the ultrastructure of a eukaryotic cell. So which organelles do you already know? Have a look at the picture, pause the video, and see if you can label them now. Here are the ones that you probably could find, though the picture does look slightly different to what you're used to, so do not worry if you've missed a couple out. From GCSE, you should have been able to identify the plasma membrane, the cytoplasm, the mitochondrion. Mitochondria is plural, so if there's only one, it's a mitochondrion. The ribosomes, which are attached to that structure there, and there's also 3 ribosomes inside your cytoplasm. So now let's introduce some of our new A-level ones. So the nucleus is actually made up of lots of different parts. So here you can see on this outside of the nucleus, you have a nuclear membrane, which holds all the parts of the nucleus in. You have a dense area in your nucleus called the nucleolus, which is where you have the assembly of ribosomes. You have chromatin inside your nucleus, which is your genetic information. You have a nuclear pore, which allows things to enter and leave the nucleus. For example, mRNA leaves the nucleus. And you have nucleoplasm, which is like cytoplasm, but inside your nucleus. And then we have some other organelles that we would like to introduce that I don't think you will have seen before. So you have your lysosome, which contains hydrolytic enzymes to break down macromolecules such as carbohydrates and proteins. Animal cells actually have vacuoles, though they are not permanent. They can come and go and they can change where they are. You have rough endoplasmic reticulum, which is surrounded by ribosomes, suggesting that the rough endoplasmic reticulum is involved in protein synthesis. You have a centriole, which makes spindle fibers for mitosis and meiosis. You have smooth endoplasmic reticulum, which is involved in lipid synthesis, and your Golgi body, which packages and modifies proteins. So let's look at the functions of all these organelles in a little bit more detail. But first of all, let's have a look at plants. Okay, so plants, again, they have the same organelles, but you have that added chloroplast, cellulose cell wall, and your permanent vacuole. So here are the functions of all these organelles. So your nucleus contains hereditary material, and therefore it controls cell activities such as transcription, so protein synthesis, and mitosis, and it controls mitosis via DNA replication. Inside your nucleus, you have that dense area, your nucleolus, which is a site of production and assembly of ribosome components. You have rough endoplasmic reticulum inside your cell. This is generally found around your nucleus. These are studded with ribosomes and involved in the synthesis and transport of proteins destined for secretion. So secretion means releasing outside of the cell. You have smooth endoplasmic reticulum, which is involved in the synthesis and transport of lipids and steroids, as well as metabolism of carbohydrates. So, for example, metabolism of starch into maltose into glucose. The Golgi apparatus is an assembly of vesicles and folded membranes involved in the sorting, storing, and modification of secretory products. So secretory products are things that we are trying to release from the cell, for example, proteins. Next, we have ribosomes, which are complexes as rRNA. So R stands for ribosomal, RNA. And some proteins, they're responsible for polypeptide synthesis. Eukaryotic ribosomes are larger than prokaryotes. They are 80S rather than 70S. As you find in prokaryotes. The mitochondria is the site of aerobic respiration, which produces large quantities of the chemical ATP. ATP is used to release energy inside your cells. Lysosomes are the site of hydrolysis or digestion or the breakdown of macromolecules. So, for example, you may break down proteins into amino acids. Chloroplasts is the site of photosynthesis. The plasma membrane is a semi-permeable barrier that controls the entry and exit of substances. Centrioles are a microtubule organising centre, so spindle fibres are made out of microtubules. So centrioles make spindle fibres which are involved in cell division. So this could be mitosis or meiosis. And then cytoplasm is the fluid portion of the cell, and this is where your chemical reactions take place and it holds your organelles. So they are the functions of the organelles that you need to know at A level. So you can see that there is some more detail in GCSE, but if you learn them, you will be absolutely fine. So as you've seen at GCSE, not all eukaryotic cells look the same. Some are specialised, and at GCSE, you looked at specific cells that are specialised. So for example, a neuron, it's long, it has an axon, it has dendrites, and it has the synaptic terminals, which allow for action potential to be propagated along the neuron and taken around the body through the nervous system. Another example of a specialised animal cell is a sperm cell. We've got acrosomes, which contain those enzymes which can break into the egg, the nucleus, which contains the genetic information, and the mitochondria in the midsection, which allow energy for the tail to swim up to the egg. Another animal cell which is specialised is a red blood cell, which has no nucleus to increase the amount of space it has to be able to carry oxygen around your body. An example of a specialised plant cell is a root hair cell. A root hair cell is adapted with that long appendage to be able to take up ions from the soil and into your plant. And then lastly, in the bottom right, we have a leaf cell, and you can see how those cells are specialised with specific functions. So your epidermal layer is transparent to let the light through, so your palisade mesophyll underneath with your chloroplast in it can undergo photosynthesis and make glucose. So these cells are specialised, and then they are organised into tissues. These tissues are organised into organs, and they're organised into organ systems. So cells are the smallest unit of life. A tissue is a group of specialised cells that have a similar structure and function. An organ is a structure made of several different tissues, and an organ system is a group of organs that carry out a particular function. So this is a little task for you now. Each box contains a different system. It has an example of a cell, a tissue, an organ, and an organ system. I would like you to put them in order, from cell to organ system. We pause video and have a go. Okay, here are the answers. So the first one, the smallest unit is a nerve cell. A tissue is nervous system. Then your organ is the brain, and your organ system is the nervous system. The next one, you have your red blood cell. The tissue is cardiac muscle. Your heart is the organ which is made out of that cardiac muscle, and the whole system is your circulatory system. Lastly, penultimately, we have mesophyll cells. These mesophyll cells make up pleural tissue. These make up part of your lung, which is your organ, and your lung is part of your respiratory system. And then the plant example is you have a palisade cell, which makes up palisade mesophyll, which then is part of the organ, which is the leaf. So you should now know how to describe the structure of eukaryotic cells restricted to the structure and function of the organelles which we have discussed. You should also be able to explain that in complex multicellular organisms, eukaryotic cells become specialised. They are then organised into tissues, organs, and organ systems. And you should be able to apply your knowledge of these features to explain how cells are adapted to their function.